the book club.
Hello, everyone.
I am Miss Maka.
And I'm Mr. Derill. Today we are going to talk about an American classic. It's been called the Great American Novel, and it is The Great Gatsby.
Yes, and the author is Francis Scott Fitzgerald. But before we start talking about the story itself, let's look at our agenda. So first thing we do is we look at the vocabulary that we need. Then we will talk about the author. After, we will talk about the summary. So we'll tell you shortly what is the story about.
We'll have a look at characters after that. These are the ways that the story is pushed forward by their characters. We'll look at the setting, give you context by looking at the when and the where of the story. And then we will close off with main themes, which is generally why does the author choose the things that he talks about.
Yes, and finally we'll wrap up the whole thing and of course give you homework.
I guess it wouldn't be a lesson without some homework.
Of course, Mr. Darrell.
Now let's move on to the vocabulary. We've chosen 8 words that are used in the book and that we use in our discussion of this book. I will pronounce them first twice and then you can go on with the Georgian.
Then I will translate into Georgian.
Okay, our first word is a noun and it is bootlegger. Bootlegger. This is someone who is involved with the illegal trade of alcohol at a time when maybe alcohol is banned.
აკრძალული საქონლით მოვაჭრე.
Okay, our next word is flapper. Flapper. This is always a young woman who, especially during the 1920s, behaved and dressed in a very boldly modern manner.
20-იანი წლების თანამედროვე ქალი.
Our next word is debutante. It's a bit hard to pronounce, so debutante. This is a young woman who's kind of making her first big appearance in society, maybe at a party or maybe at like some kind of big banquet.
Debutante.
Okay, our next word is flamboyance. Flamboyance. It's a noun and it refers to something that is something brilliant or showy or flashy, and this is flamboyance.
ელვარება, ბრწყინვალება.
We have a noun next and it's socialite. Socialite. This is a person, a socially prominent person who goes to all the fashionable parties and is seen everywhere.
საზოგადოებაში ცნობილი პირი, რომელიც ყველა წვეულებაზე დადის.
Our next word is expatriate. Expatriate. A person who doesn't live in his own country and has settled somewhere else but doesn't give up his citizenship of the old country.
ექსპატრიანტი. პიროვნება, რომელიც გადადის სხვა ქვეყანაში საცხოვრებლად, თუმცა არ თმობს მოქალაქეობას თავისი ქვეყნის.
Our next word is speakeasy. Speakeasy. This is a place, a club or bar where you could buy alcohol secretly, especially if it's been illegal in the country.
ეს არის ბარი ან ღამის კლუბი, რომელიც ალკოჰოლს უკანონოდ ყიდის. განსაკუთრებით მაშინ, როდესაც ალკოჰოლი აკრძალულია.
And our last word is disillusionment. Disillusionment. Being free from an illusion or like a false idea.
გულგატეხილობა.
Okay, we have a question for the audience, and that question is, what is the difference between being an immigrant and being an expatriate?
Immigrants move to a country and change their citizenship, while expatriates move to a country and don't change their citizenship.
Excellent.
Excellent.
That is the difference between an immigrant and an expatriate.
So, Mr. Derill, you're an expatriate as far as I know.
Yes, I think I qualify as an expatriate.
Okay, thank you very much.
Okay, Ms. Maka, let's move on to a look at today's author, and that is F. Scott Fitzgerald. That's how he was commonly known. We didn't really pronounce his first name. You just kind of say F. Scott Fitzgerald. He was born at the end of the 19th century, and he died fairly young in 1940, so it isn't too long that he lived. He was an American novelist, essayist, screenwriter, and short story writer. But he was best known for novels that depicted the Jazz Age, which we'll talk about quite a lot today. And it's, in fact, a term that he invented. So he invented that term. What is the Jazz Age? Well, we shall see.
Yes, and it's a very interesting period. During his lifetime, Mr. Fitzgerald published 4 novels, so 4 collections of short stories and 164 short stories. Although he temporarily achieved his success and fortune in 1920s, he got his wide critical and popular acclaim after his death. So he is widely regarded as one of the greatest American writers of the 20th century.
Mm-hmm. And like many of us, he fell in love with a rich socialite woman named Zelda Sayre. Although she initially rejects him because he's not rich enough for her, she does agree to marry him when he publishes one of his novels, which becomes a bit of a success. And then she says, well, I think I love you now.
Oh, okay, how strange. So in the 1920s, he very often visited Europe. So he was very influenced by the modernist writers and the artists. That's where he befriended a very popular writer. This is Ernest Hemingway. Actually, he's one of my favorite writers as well.
Mine as well. So Mr. Fitzgerald's 3rd novel is what we're talking about today, The Great Gatsby, published in 1925. It was inspired by his own rise to fame and his relationship with Zelda. Although it received very, very mixed reviews at the time, so not all were positive, it is now called the Great American Novel.
Yes, and definitely we now understand how valuable this story is. So Fitzgerald, like Gatsby, had always exalted the rich and was driven by the love of a woman who symbolized everything for him. And even as he was led towards a lifestyle he actually didn't really like, we would say he actually hated. Faced with financial difficulties due to the declining popularity, he died of alcoholism in 1940.
Unfortunate.
Yeah.
Now we have a question for our audience. As we mentioned, initially the book was not popular and then it became very, very popular. Why do you think it became popular after the death of the author?
Because I think when authors die young with a little bit of tragedy in their lives, people become more curious and appreciate their work.
Very good answer, an excellent answer. That often happens when the author or the artist dies, suddenly they become huge.
Yeah, exactly. We kind of appreciate them more maybe or something. I don't know.
Now let's move on to the summary of our story. We'll make it quick because you should really enjoy it on your own. Now, in the spring of 1922, the setting of the novel, our lead character, Nick Carraway, he's a university graduate and a veteran of the First World War. He goes to New York as a salesman, so he's not rich, you can see from that. But fortunately or unfortunately, he moves next to a millionaire, and that is J. Gatsby, who has this funny habit of hosting like fantastic parties, which he doesn't go to, or he doesn't really enjoy.
Yes, but in this case, one morning, Nick gets some kind of invitation at a Gatsby's mansion. So of course he goes there, and from the beginning he's a bit embarrassed when he realizes he cannot really talk to anyone because he does not know anyone. It was until he met this girl who he is attracted to. While chatting with this girl, he's approached by a man, and can you imagine who this was? Of course, this was Mr. Gatsby. So Mr. Gatsby insists that Nick and him together, they were part of the same army unit, and like during the war. Gatsby attempts to befriend Nick, and when Nick leaves the party, he notices that Gatsby is watching him.
So he takes an interest in Nick
Yeah.
for some reason. Much later on, like late in summer, Nick and Gatsby are having lunch at a speakeasy. As you remember, we spoke about the speakeasy in the beginning. Gatsby tries to impress Nick. He's still trying to impress Nick with stories of his army days and his university days at Oxford. And Nick finally finds out from someone else that Gatsby and a mutual friend of theirs, Daisy, had fallen in love in 1917, just before the war started. However, Daisy is now married to another friend of theirs, Tom. So there's this love triangle that's going on. Gatsby, it turns out, has been hoping to win Daisy back to him, and that's why he's a millionaire.
Wow, that's interesting. We will later see if this love is true or not, of course. In September, Tom discovers the affair when Daisy carelessly addresses Gatsby with an abashed intimacy in front of him. So later at a hotel, of course, Tom and Gatsby have an argue. Daisy claims she loves both at the same time.
And that causes trouble, of course.
Yeah.
You can't really say that out loud.
Yeah.
Tom, in fact, is so jealous that he reveals that Gatsby, how he made his money, was through bootlegging illegal alcohol, and he's basically a criminal mafia type man, and that's how he's made his money.
While taking Daisy home, Gatsby and Daisy accidentally hit the car, so they killed a female named Myrtle. Gatsby reveals to Nick that it was Daisy who was driving the car, but he was going to take blame on himself. Of course, Nick tries to make sure that everything is okay, and he offers Gatsby to run away. But there, Gatsby actually refuses.
So he basically sacrifices himself knowingly. What happens is, unfortunate, he gets killed in his own swimming pool in his mansion by the husband of the woman that he killed.
Yeah, so of course, it is better to read the book, although we kind of told you the ending of the story. We highly recommend you to read the book. It is very interesting. So now, after hearing the summary of the story, let's address to our audience with the first question. Why did Gatsby trust Nick?
They were in the same army unit, and I have generally heard that people who become friends in army unit, they also become very strong friends for all their lives.
Yeah, thank you very much.
That's very true. Army units tend to bring people together very strongly.
We know lots of stories about this.
We have a second question for our audience. Who do you think loved Daisy more? Was it Tom or was it Gatsby?
I think Gatsby loved her more because he actually sacrificed his life to protect her reputation.
Yeah, that's a very good point. It is Gatsby, after all, who sacrifices himself for Daisy, so he probably loved her more.
Or he has a chance to prove his love. Maybe Tom would do the same.
Yeah, and it was Gatsby's turn and he took it.
Yeah.
Maybe. Okay. Okay, then let's move on to the characters of the book. There's quite a few fascinating characters, and let's start with the main character, Nick Carraway. He's a college graduate from Yale, a war veteran, and is aged about 30 when the book happens. He is also the first-person narrator of the novel, and he turns out to be Gatsby's next-door neighbor. His personality, he's a bit easygoing, sometimes sarcastic, sometimes optimistic, but as the book progresses, he loses that optimism. So he becomes less and less optimistic. He's more practical than the other characters as well.
But he still manages to get the trust of a millionaire, right? So he had something.
He's talented with meeting people.
Yes, definitely. And mentioning millionaire, this is Gatsby, so J. Gatsby, originally James Jimmy Gatz. He's a young, mysterious millionaire, as we already mentioned, but with a shady connection, business connections. So this is later revealed as selling alcohol illegally. So he was a bootlegger. During World War I, where he was a young military officer, he encounters the love of his life, the beautiful debutante Daisy.
Now let's move on to Daisy herself. Daisy Buchanan is her name. She's portrayed as very attractive, but shallow and self-absorbed at the same time. And she's identified as a flapper, so a stylish, modern woman. She is the wife of Tom Buchanan, but it turns out that before she married Tom, she had loved Gatsby and chooses Tom. And so it turns out that the character of Daisy might have been influenced by a real-life woman that Fitzgerald knew.
Yes, maybe. So our next character is George B. Wilson. Actually, he is the one who finishes the story, this brilliant story of a great millionaire guy. So he's a mechanic and an owner of a garage. He is disliked by both his wife and by Tom Buchanan, who actually described him as a person who does not even know he is alive. So can you imagine what kind of dull person he is when he does not really even know that he is alive?
Quite boring, probably, in personality, and probably very simple.
Yes. At the end of the novel, he kills Gatsby, wrongly believing that he had been driving the car and he killed Myrtle, his wife. And then later, George kills himself, commits suicide.
Murder, suicide. Dark ending. Okay,
Yeah.
I have a question for the audience now. What is the connection between Nick, Daisy, and Gatsby?
They all met each other in World War I.
Exactly. Good answer. That is exactly how they met each other.
Well done. So our second question is, do you find the characters likable?
As we know, coins have two sides. Some aspects of their life are very exciting, like the glamorous life they lead is very attractive, but some aspects like arrogance or selfishness actually overweighs the positive sides of the characters.
Of course, we should agree with you definitely, because everything has both sides, positive and negative.
It was a good answer, very good answer.
Thank you.
There are always two sides to everything.
Yes.
Okay, let's move on to the setting now. And we are in New York in 1922, and it is the Jazz Age. The Great Gatsby provides actually a very good picture of the Jazz Age in this book.
Yes, this is Jazz Age, the period of prosperity, of flapper culture, economic prosperity, and of course, lots of speakeasies, people having fun in them.
Would you have loved to live in that era?
Definitely. I think this is the best era for me.
There's a dark side, though. Fitzgerald shows that in this novel. He points out behind the parties and the glamour, there were a lot of cynicism and maybe darker emotions going on.
So, and he attempts to communicate his ambivalent feelings regarding the Jazz Age. So he's neither very positive or negative about it.
Okay, great work, Ms. Maka. Okay, we have a question for the audience now. How essential is the setting to this book? Could it have happened at any other time?
No, because the Jazz Age represents a period where everyone lived for happiness and pleasure, because they had so much money, and they indulged themselves too much, never thinking about the future.
Good answer, yeah.
Yeah, definitely. And of course, it is about main theme that we have.
It's a good transition to our
Yes.
main themes.
Thank you very much.
And our main theme, there's a lot of themes in this book, of course, and we are going to choose one because I think it's the most important one.
Yes, and Fitzgerald has come to be associated with this concept of the American dream more than any other writer of the 20th century.
We should explain what the American dream is because it's so important to this book. It's the great belief held by most Americans that you are free to be who you want, in politics, in finances, in social life, to be who you want because America is the land of opportunity.
Yes, however, some critics have noted that Fitzgerald's unique expression of the American dream actually lacks optimism, the sense of fulfillment, so evident in the expressions of his predecessors.
Yeah, and this is the main point, really, the point that we were getting to. So he brings up the American dream, but only to say how negative it is. There's a lot of nightmare things that happen to people. In chasing after your dreams, what happens? Maybe you've had to betray people, you've had to push people down to get up there, and this is what Fitzgerald focuses on.
Yes, and he has a very good technique to show it to you.
Yeah.
Okay. So, now the question to our audience. What does Fitzgerald reveal about the American dream in this book?
I think we can clearly see that American dream for author is an utopia because we can come close to it, but it is almost impossible to reach.
Yeah.
Excellent answer.
Yeah. That's exactly what he showed in this book. Thank you very much. Now, Mr. Derill, I think it is time to wrap it up.
Wrap it up. Let us do that. So, you can start with our author.
Yes, our author is Francis Scott Fitzgerald.
And the summary, remember it's a story about the dark side of the American dream.
Yeah, the characters, Nick, then we have a millionaire, J. Gatsby, Daisy Buchanan, Gatsby loves Daisy, George B. Wilson, a person who killed Gatsby.
Okay, and the setting, as you remember, it's New York in the 1920s, the era of the flapper.
Yes, and the main themes, that was the American dream.
Yeah, and the dark side of the American dream. Okay, we have homework for our TV audience. And the question is this. The character of J. Gatsby is not a perfect man, as we've seen. Why do you think the name of the book is The Great Gatsby?
როგორც ხედავთ, მთავარი პერსონაჟი J. Gatsby არ არის სრულყოფილი პიროვნება. როგორ ფიქრობთ, რატომ ქვია წიგნს დიდი Gatsby?
We look forward to your answers and please send them to the address on the screen.
გამოგვიგზავნეთ საშინაო დავალება ეკრანზე მითითებულ მისამართზე.
Okay, we've had a great discussion with our audience and with yourself as well. I enjoyed the discussion.
Yes, and we had a great book for today, and I really enjoyed it.
Yeah, it's a rare one.
But unfortunately or fortunately, I think that's all for today, and hope to see you soon. See you next week.
Have a great week.
Goodbye.
Goodbye.